Now that was the snack bar. The other dialog I wanted to add is here in the cart. When we dismiss an item, right now, once we swipe, it's simply gone. We don't get asked whether we're sure if we want to remove that. Now, of course, that might be the approach you want to follow. Maybe you don't want to ask the user because you're pretty confident that if someone swipes here, which of course also takes some effort, he really is sure that this should be removed. And that's totally fine. But also for this tutorial's sake, I of course want to show you how you could show a dialog here. It's our card item, the card item Dart file, which is dismissible here. And now the goal would be to step in here on the dismissible widget and prevent it from being dismissed if the user doesn't confirm a dialog. Now for that on dismissible, we can add a confirm dismiss argument, which takes a function. And of course, I'm now also working with a lot of anonymous functions. You can always have named functions at which you simply point. And here in this anonymous function, we get, as we can see here, the dismiss direction which was chosen, and we have to return a future. You remember that's that object which eventually will return a result, which eventually returns a Boolean result. Boolean because it eventually has to tell Flutter whether we want to dismiss or not, so true or false. So we get the direction here, and then in here, as I said, we have to return a future. We can simply do that by returning future and then value to immediately return a value like true, which is wrapped into a future, and that fulfills this condition of having to return a future here. But that's of course not the idea. Well, let's start with the dialog and then worry about the future. So we can show a dialog simply with the help of show dialog. Now, unlike the snack bar, for this we need no scaffold because this is not attached to a page, so to say. A dialog can be shown anywhere, so it's just show dialog here. And show dialog now requires a context argument because you still need to give it a context so that it knows to which widget to attach itself, so to say. So here we have to pass in context to make sure that you have one available in the place where you call show dialog. So context here on the right side of the colon refers to the context we're getting here in the build method. And we have to pass this with the context argument to show dialog. Now, besides the context, show dialog then also typically takes a builder, and that builder here gives you its own context, as all the builders do in Flutter typically. They give you their own context for the widget they're about to build. And what you return here typically should be a dialog widget. Now, if you enter dialog here, you see you have various dialogs. You have a base class, which you typically don't use, but then you have an about dialog, and most importantly, an alert dialog, which is the dialog you'll probably use most often. The alert dialog is able to take a title, and title here is a widget, typically, of course, a text widget, but as so often, it could also be a row with an icon and a text next to each other, for example. And here I'll just say, are you sure, as the title for this dialog. And besides the title, you then typically also have a content, and our content also is a widget here. And here I'll just have more text. Do you want to remove the item from the cart? Something meaningful which, well, informs the user about what you want from him. Well, and after the content, there are other things you can configure, like the background color, the padding around the content, the drop shadow, and so on. So feel free to play around with all of that. But I want to add some actions here. Basically, two actions. And actions typically here are flat buttons, as you also learn in the tooltip. And the first flat button will have a child where I say in my text widget, no. And then in onPressed, we should do something that makes sure that we don't continue here with dismissing this item. And the other flat button here has a child text of yes, where we of course should do something that does go ahead with dismissing the item. So that's the dialog setup now. But remember that in here, in confirm dismiss, this function actually has to return a future and not just call show dialog. Now, show dialog actually does return a future though. That's the good thing. And this future will be called whenever the dialog is closed. So actually we can return the result of show dialog here, because again, show dialog returns a future. So we return a future now. But it should be a future that in the end yields true or false, and that's the missing piece. But here in onPressed, we can control what the future resolves to by calling, and that's also something the tooltip tells us, by calling navigator pop. So the future resolves to a value that was passed to navigator pop. So here in onPressed, we just have to call navigator of context, or actually here, we can use the CTX, the context the builder gives us, pop. This will close the dialog, and now here we can also forward a value. That's optional, but here we want to do that because we want to yield a value with our future in the end. If the user chose no, we don't want to dismiss, so we don't want to confirm the dismissal, so we want to return false here. In the yes button, of course, the opposite is the case. Here, of CTX, we want to pop with a value of true, because here we want to go ahead and dismiss this. And now with that, if we save that, if you add an item to the cart and you now swipe here, you see it doesn't get dismissed entirely. Instead, I get asked here. And if I choose no, it comes back and it's not dismissed because of that change and because of popping with false. If I, however, answer with yes, it goes ahead and clears that. And it's really gone, the total updated, and it's gone here if you go back to the cart. So this shows you two things: how to confirm the dismissal of the dismissible widget, and how to show dialogs. And of course, you can show dialogs in other situations too. Doesn't have to be to confirm a dismissal, can be in any scenario where you want to confirm something or warn the user or simply show some extra information to the user. With show dialog, that's really easy, as you can tell.